Hey guys, have a great night. The air over the Nile tonight is still and warm, carrying the faint scent of lotus and river mud. Somewhere in the distance, the soft splash of an oar breaks the surface, and the gentle croak of frogs folds into the chorus of crickets. The moonlight shimmers on the dark water like molten silver. In the palace, you are barely more than a child, yet already you feel the ancient weight of Egypt's destiny pressing upon your small shoulders. One day, this land of temples deserts, and a river older than history will be yours to command. And if you're lucky, you probably won't survive the sheer amount of relatives plotting in the background. Support us by liking this video and subscribing so we can keep bringing you calm, comforting stories every night. Now close your eyes, listen closely, and let this gentle story ease you into a peaceful slumber. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now, or if you prefer, share how you're feeling this evening, even if it's tired, worried, or just a little curious about ancient Egypt. Take a slow, deep breath, settle into your favorite spot, and let the gentle rhythm of this story carry you far from today's worries. The palace walls are smooth limestone washed with lime plaster and painted in colors that seem to drink the sunlight by day and glow faintly at night. Your cradle is carved from cedar lined with fine linen and scented with frankincense. Servants come and go their bare feet whispering against polished floors. Outside your chamber, a steady procession of priests, scribes, and court officials move in quiet rhythm, tending to the business of the two lands. You are Ramses, golden child of Pharaoh II, and though you are swaddled in silk, the threads of your life are already being pulled taut by the loom of state. Historians still argue whether your mother, Queen Tuya, truly believed you were touched by the gods, or whether she simply wanted to make sure everyone else thought so. Either way, your birth is marked by omens unusual flooding of the Nile flocks of sacred ibises lingering near the palace gardens, and a comet that streaks across the sky on the night of your naming. The high priests nod gravely. This child will be great, they whisper. This child will change Egypt. Your earliest memories are a blend of sound and scent, the murmur of the Nile at flood, the rustle of papyrus reeds, the acrid sweetness of incense curling through the air during temple rites. Your toys are miniature chariots carved from wood, tiny ivory lions and painted dolls shaped like the gods. Nursemaids sing you lullabies that have been sung for 1,000 years, verses so old that even the singers do not know their origin. Already, you are paraded through ceremonial processions in miniature versions of royal regalia, beaded collars, linen kilts, and a scaled-down headdress that keeps slipping over your eyes. People bow as you pass, murmuring blessings. It's less about your charm and more about your bloodline, but you're too young to care. You only know that the world seems to revolve around you. And maybe the temple cats who treat you as a junior member of their sacred order. One fringe detail the chroniclers rarely record your father's court keeps a pet baboon dressed in a tiny gold collar, who occasionally escapes into your nursery and steals figs from your breakfast tray. The servants pretend to be horrified, but you secretly delight in it. This little troublemaker is the only creature who dares snatch food from the son of Pharaoh. As you grow, the palace corridors become your playground. You race barefoot through cool, shadowy halls, dodge around papyrus scroll racks, and sneak into the kitchens where bread bakes in clay ovens. You learn early that everyone is watching you. Every laugh, every stumble, every tantrum is noted by someone who will later whisper it to someone else. The court is a garden of lotus flowers and scorpions. The priests begin your education almost before you can speak. You are shown the sacred hieroglyphs, pictures that are not just words, but magical symbols linking the mortal and divine realms. You practice with a reed pen smudging ink across your hands. Your tutors teach you to recite the names of every god, every pharaoh, every province of the two lands. They speak of Mahat, the cosmic order that keeps the sun rising and the Nile flowing, and explain that one day it will be your sacred duty to uphold it. In quiet moments, your father visits you. Setiai Silai is a tall, commanding figure with a gaze like the desert sun, warm when it shines on you, blistering when it turns elsewhere. He shows you how to grip a small bow, how to stand like a warrior, even though your knees still wobble. He tells you stories of battle against the Libyans and the Asiatics, of fortresses built to guard Egypt's borders, of the might of the Pharaoh that stretches from the delta to the cataracts of Nubia. But there are shadows even in these golden days. You sense the constant calculation behind every adult smile. There are whispers in corridors about succession, how many princes there are, who is favored, who might accidentally fall from a balcony. You don't understand the danger yet, but you feel its presence like the hot breath of a crocodile just beneath the water's surface. The Nile floods again, swelling with life-giving silt, and you watch from a palace balcony as peasants sow their fields. You don't yet grasp that their labor, their grain, their loyalty will one day be the foundation of your throne. For now the world is bright, the air is heavy with the perfume of lotus, and the path ahead seems endless. You are Ramses, golden child of Egypt, and whether the gods have chosen you or not, you are already learning how to shine. The sun beats down over the palace courtyard. As you step out, the white limestone reflecting so brightly, it forces you to squint. You are no longer a toddling prince hidden in the nursery. You are now the crown prince in training, and everyone treats you as such. The linen you wear is finer, the collars heavier with gold, and the sandals more ornate than practical. You walk with a small retinue of tutors, guards, and scribes, their presence a constant reminder that you are never, ever alone. Training begins before the morning heat has a chance to wilt the papyrus flowers. Your weapons master, a scar-faced veteran who claims he once killed a Libyan chieftain, with nothing but a tent peg, teaches you to draw a bow without flinching. You strain against the bowstring, your small arms trembling, but you refuse to give him the satisfaction of seeing you fail. He grunts approval, a sound rarer than rain in the desert. Historians still argue whether you truly excelled at these arts from the start, or if your tutors simply told your father what he wanted to hear. Either way, the lessons continue: spear practice against straw dummies, sword drills with blunted bronze wrestling matches with boys twice your size. In Egypt, even a god-king must look convincing on the battlefield, so you learn the warrior's stance as carefully as you learn your prayers. Your mornings aren't all dust and sweat. After a midday rest, you are escorted to the palace's shaded gardens, where another kind of education unfolds. Scholars teach you geometry for building temples, astronomy for reading the heavens, and rhetoric for swaying your future court. You learn to read the Nile's moods, how its flooding will bring life or famine, and to interpret the movements of the stars, because in Egypt, politics is as much about omens as decrees. One curious exercise involves memorizing the exact ceremonial order of processions, which gods come first, which priests walk beside which banners, and how far apart each group must be. A slip in the order might offend the gods, or worse, the high priest, which can be just as dangerous. You practice this until you can walk blindfolded in perfect rhythm, guided only by the sound of the drums. You're introduced to the language of diplomacy as well. Your father occasionally summons you to sit quietly at the back of the audience hall during foreign envoys' visits. It's not as exciting as sword practice, but you begin to understand the subtler weapons of kingship, flattery, controlled silence, and the art of letting someone think they've won, when in truth they've lost. You see Seti lean forward in his gilded chair, his expression unreadable, his words smooth as the Nile at dawn. You try to mimic it later in front of a mirror, but your version looks more like you're holding in a sneeze. Not all your lessons are about ruling. Some are about surviving the very palace you will one day command. You're taught to read the tilt of an eyebrow, the faint twitch at the corner of a mouth, the way courtiers shift their feet when they're lying. A fringe tidbit. You'll never find in the temple inscriptions the palace has a secret network of old women who work as laundresses, cooks, and nursemaids, yet somehow know every scandal before it happens. Befriend them, and you'll know more than half the viziers put together. Your mother, Queen Tuya, takes her role in your training seriously. She ensures you are schooled in the gods' myths, temple rituals, and the delicate balance of pleasing both the nobility and the common people. She insists that compassion is a strength, not a weakness, but warns that in the wrong moment it can be fatal. Over honeyed bread one morning she says softly, "A king must see with two eyes, one to know the truth and one to hide it." Evenings bring a different kind of rehearsal. You attend grand banquets where musicians pluck harps and lutes, dancers twirl with ankle bells chiming, and servants move in perfect choreography, pouring wine from alabaster jars. You're expected to sit tall, laugh at the right moments, and remember the names of every dignitary at the table. One evening, you accidentally greet a visiting general as keeper of the royal fish pond instead of commander of the army. The room freezes until the general bursts out laughing. Still, the scribes won't let you forget it for weeks. Occasionally, your father takes you on short inspection tours along the Nile. You travel in a sleek royal barge, its painted hull shimmering under the sun, escorted by smaller boats rowed in unison. From the deck, you watch the endless quilt of Egypt pass by fields of barley and emmer wheat. Herds of cattle grazing under acacia trees, fishermen casting nets like silver fans into the water. At each stop, villagers kneel in greeting, pressing their foreheads to the earth. You wave, wondering if you'll ever truly understand what they see in you. Late at night, when the palace grows quiet and the air cools, you lie awake on your bed of linen sheets, staring at the painted stars on your ceiling. You imagine the day when the crook and flail will be in your hands, the weight of Egypt's crown, pressing against your brow. Will you be ready? Will you be strong enough? The moonlight spills across the floor like a path, and for a moment you believe it's guiding you forward to a destiny carved in stone long before you were born. The desert air is still cool in the early dawn when you hear the clatter of chariot wheels in the courtyard. You are 16 now, tall for your age, your shoulders broadening your voice, carrying a deeper timbre that startles even you. Today is no ordinary day. Today, for the first time, you will command men in the field. Not a staged drill, not a parade in front of the palace, but a real mission against raiders who have been plundering the eastern trade routes. Your father Seti does not hand out such honours lightly. Historians still argue whether he truly trusted your abilities, or if this was a calculated test, one you were meant to pass or else. Either way, you wake before sunrise, linen kilt, freshly pressed bronze sword, oiled and gleaming. In the half-light, servants tighten the leather straps of your chariot harness, while your weapons master checks your bowstring with a grunt. You feel a strange mix of excitement and the faint sourness of fear in your stomach. The raiders are described as desert-hardened tribes. Lean men with sun-bleached hair and eyes like flint, mounted on swift horses able to vanish into the dunes as if swallowed by the earth. Traders have been ambushed, caravans stripped bare, guards slain or left wandering thirsty in the sun. They have grown bold, perhaps too bold, thinking Egypt's young prince will be an easy mark. Your column sets out in a spray of golden sand chariots, rattling in perfect formation, horses snorting clouds into the morning air. The Nile falls away behind you, replaced by a rolling expanse of ochre and gold. In the distance, the desert heat dances, warping the horizon into a wavering mirage. You have studied the art of war since you could walk, but now theory gives way to reality. The wind dries your lips, dust grits between your teeth, and the leather reins bite into your palms. Your driver, a wiry veteran named Hori, leans close and murmurs, "Keep your eyes moving, Prince. The desert talks if you listen." You scan the ridges, the empty wadis, the clumps of thorny scrub, wondering if every shadow hides an enemy. The attack comes without warning. A spray of arrows hisses from a rocky rise, one clattering against your chariot rail. Horses rear and whinny. You shout commands, voice cracking in the rush of battle. Archers behind you return fire, the strings twang, and the dull thud of arrows finding wood or flesh filling the air. The raiders burst from cover, ululating cries echoing in the canyons of stone. Instinct takes over. You notch an arrow draw until your shoulders burn and let fly. The shaft vanishes into the melee, whether it strikes or not you don't pause to see. You urge Hori forward, the chariot bumping and swaying dangerously as you close the gap. You remember your father's words, lead from the front, but never so far the army can't see you. Yet here you are near enough to see the whites of the raiders' eyes. The fighting is quick and brutal. Bronze blades clash, horses scream, men shout and fall. In the chaos, you nearly tip the chariot, turning sharply to avoid a fallen horse. One raider lunges at your side. Your driver swerves and you slash downward, feeling the jolt run up your arm as your sword meets resistance. For a heartbeat, time slows. Then the man crumples and the tide begins to turn. The raiders break, scattering like starlings before a hawk. Your men pursue far enough to make the point Egypt's borders are not for the taking, but you call them back before they vanish into the deep desert. You have won, though the sweat and dust on your skin tell you how close the fight truly was. When you return to camp, the soldiers cheer, lifting their bows in salute. Some clasp your forearm as an equal. A few still glance at you with the faintest question in their eyes, but the doubt is fading. You have commanded in battle and returned alive, a rite of passage as binding as any coronation. That night, as the campfire crackles and the smell of roasting lamb drifts on the wind, your driver leans over and says quietly, "You fought like a man today, but a king is more than a man with a sword. Remember that." You nod, though you're not entirely sure what he means. There is one fringe detail the official scribes will never record. At some point in the battle, your royal kilt snagged on a splinter of the chariot rail and tore nearly to the hip. You didn't notice until afterward, but the soldiers certainly did. They have already coined a nickname for you, half in jest, half in respect, that will likely follow you for years. The return journey is slower. You are not in a hurry to get back to the safety of the palace. The desert feels different now, less like an empty expanse, more like a place you have earned the right to cross. You find yourself thinking not only about the next battle, but about the day you will lead Egypt's armies as Pharaoh. You have tasted command, and it is sweeter and far more dangerous than you imagined. As you cross back into the green lands along the Nile, farmers look up from their work to see the young prince ride past, dust-streaked and sunburned, flanked by veterans who now call you one of their own. You straighten in the chariot, letting them see the man you are becoming. You do not know it yet, but the story of this day will be told for decades each time, with a little more glory and a little less torn kilt detail. The palace smells of lotus and myrrh when you return, but instead of the usual flurry of military reports and weapon polishing, you are greeted by something far more delicate and far more dangerous: marriage negotiations. You are no longer just the victorious young prince who proved himself in battle. You are a prime piece of Egypt's political chessboard, and your father is already thinking about which alliances might strengthen the throne. Nefertari's name first drifts to you in the soft murmur of palace corridors. Historians still argue whether you had ever truly met her before the betrothal arrangements began, or if your first impressions came from stylized paintings and whispered praises. What's certain is that her name is spoken with a blend of admiration and calculation. She is not just beautiful, though her beauty is legendary, with eyes like polished obsidian and a voice as smooth as honey poured from a jar. She comes from a noble family with deep Theban roots, and her marriage to you will solidify loyalties in Upper Egypt. In the days that follow, you begin to see her more often at formal banquets, temple ceremonies, and the quiet gardens where high-born women walk in the late afternoon. There is a grace to her movements, but also a spark in her gaze, as if she can read the hidden game behind every conversation. You speak cautiously at first, testing her wit. She answers with a smile that is both polite and teasing, a smile that tells you she already understands her role in this dance. Your mother, Queen Tuya, watches the two of you with open approval. She tells you over pomegranate wine one evening, a pharaoh's wife must be more than a jewel in his crown. She must be the crown itself, steady, radiant, impossible to remove without toppling the head beneath it. You suspect she is warning you not to underestimate this woman you will soon call great royal wife. The wedding preparations consume the palace. Goldsmiths hammer delicate inlays for her jewelry. Linen makers weave bolts of the sheerest fabric for her gowns. Perfumers grind resins and petals into oils that will cling to her skin like memory itself. Priests rehearse the vows that will bind you before the gods, while musicians practice the slow spiraling melodies that will float over the ceremony. One fringe tidbit the temple scribes will never inscribe. The royal kitchens invent a new dessert for the occasion: date cakes drizzled with honey and sprinkled with crushed lotus seeds. They are meant to symbolize fertility and sweetness in marriage. In reality, they are so rich that half the court ends up sneaking away to nap during the banquet. When the day comes, the sun is high and unyielding, but the palace gleams as though gilded by Ra himself. You stand beneath a canopy of gold-embroidered linen, wearing the royal kilt, stiff with pleats, and a collar that glitters with turquoise and lapis. Nefertari approaches her gown flowing like water, her headdress adorned with ostrich feathers and gold cobras poised to strike. The crowd murmurs as she takes her place beside you, and for a moment, the heat, the politics, the years of preparation dissolve into something unexpectedly human. You are about to marry this woman, not just as a prince securing Egypt's borders, but as a man stepping into a shared life. The vows are spoken, the offerings made. You hold her hand as the priests pour libations to Hathor, goddess of love, and to Ma'at, goddess of truth and harmony. The music swells drums like heartbeats beneath the high wail of the reed flutes. You feel the gazes of hundreds upon you, noble soldiers, scribes and servants, all seeing not just the joining of two people, but the fusion of two great houses. The feast stretches long into the evening. You and Nefertari are seated on a dais, accepting gifts of gold vessels, carved ivory, and bolts of exotic cloth from across the empire. Dancers whirl their skirts flashing in the torchlight, while jugglers toss painted gourds high into the air. The wine flows freely and laughter rolls through the hall like a warm tide. You notice Nefertari speaking easily with your father, her words drawing a rare, genuine smile from him. She already moves in the court, as if she has always been part of it. Later, when the crowds thin and the torches burn low, you walk with her in the gardens. The moonlight spills across the lotus pools, silvering the petals. The night air is warm and fragrant, carrying the hum of distant insects. You talk about small things at first, the scent of the lilies, the way the frogs seem louder tonight. But beneath it all is the quiet awareness that your fates are now bound together. Nefertari's hand is cool in yours. She turns to you and says softly, "The gods have given us a story. It is ours to decide how it will be told." You realize then that she is not merely an ornament to your reign. She is a partner, an ally, and perhaps one day the subject of monuments that will stand long after both of you are dust. As you return to the palace, you pass the shadowed walls that will one day bear your likenesses carved in stone. You imagine her face there beside yours, her name intertwined with yours in hieroglyphs, the two of you forever walking side by side in the afterlife. The thought fills you with a strange, fierce pride. You are not just building a marriage, you are laying the foundation of a legacy. The air in the audience hall is heavy with incense when the moment finally arrives. You are 24 years old, and the crook and flail symbols of Egypt's divine kingship are placed in your hands. The ceremony is not merely a formal handover. It is the transformation of a man into a living god. You stand on the dais where your father Seti the Full once stood, the gilded walls glinting in the torchlight, the murmur of hundreds of voices swelling like the Nile in flood. Historians still argue whether you truly felt ready for this day, or whether your calm exterior was nothing more than carefully practiced statecraft. You had trained for this moment all your life, learning war diplomacy ritual, but as the sacred crowns are lowered onto your head, the reality hits you with the weight of a pyramid's foundation. Stones, every life in Egypt now rests in your hands. The high priest steps forward, his shaven head gleaming, his voice resonant, as he proclaims you ruler of the two lands, son of Ra, lord of crowns, beloved of the gods. You feel the eyes of the court upon you, nobles in shimmering linen, generals with arms folded, foreign envoys studying your every movement. You keep your face serene, the very image of divine composure, though part of you wants to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Yesterday, you were still a prince. Today, you're expected to maintain cosmic order. You take the oath of Ma'at, promising to uphold truth, justice, and balance in the world. Offerings are made to the gods, loaves of bread, bowls of beer, cuts of roast ox piled high on altars where incense coils into the air like the breath of the heavens. Somewhere in the middle of it, a small temple cat slips between the priest's legs and steals a fish from the offerings. The animal's casual defiance almost makes you smile. It feels like a reminder that even a god-king cannot control everything. When the formalities end, the palace bursts into celebration. Dancers sway in the courtyards, musicians play harps and sistrums, and the scent of roasting goose wafts from the kitchens. Foreign dignitaries present you with gifts: Nubian gold cedar from Lebanon, lapis from Afghanistan. Each is an unspoken promise, alliances sealed, trade routes, secured peace for now maintained. But beneath the revelry, you can sense the shifting currents. Generals assess your stance, priests measure your piety, and governors from distant gnomes quietly wonder how far they can push the boundaries under a young ruler. Your father's shadow still looms over the court. Some will take years to accept you as pharaoh in your own right. Your first acts as ruler are symbolic yet deliberate. You issue decrees renewing the tax exemptions of temples, ensuring the priesthood's loyalty. You order repairs to canals in the delta, a gift to farmers who will remember your generosity when the Nile's floods are too lean or too high. You summon the overseers of works to plan a new temple, because in Egypt, building is ruling. One fringe tidbit: your very first building project as pharaoh is not a grand temple, but a monumental new set of audience hall chairs. The old ones squeaked horribly during formal visits, which your scribes insisted undermined the dignity of the throne. The craftsmen, flattered and amused, carved tiny hieroglyphic puns into the underside's phrases that read, "Seat of power and throne of comfort." In the weeks after your coronation, you feel the transformation settling over you. Your private name Ramses is now joined by a long string of royal titles. User Matre Setepenre, meaning, the justice of Ra is powerful chosen of Ra. The people chant it in the streets. Scribes inscribe it on temple walls. You can almost feel the name wrapping itself around you like a ceremonial cloak. Nefertari walks at your side through this transition, her own status elevated as great royal wife. She learns the delicate art of greeting foreign queens, speaking just enough to charm without overstepping the protocols of rank. You notice how often she catches details you miss: the flicker of an envoy's eyes when he lies, the subtle tension in a governor's posture. You begin to rely on her counsel more than you expected. In quieter moments, you wander the palace gardens at night, the cool scent of papyrus and lily drifting in from the pools. You think about the path ahead. To reign as pharaoh is not merely to enjoy the luxuries of the court, it is to keep Egypt's heartbeat steady through flood and drought, war and peace, loyalty and rebellion. It is to build monuments that will outlast the bones beneath them. It is to hold the two lands together with the same unyielding grip you now have on the crook and flail. You remember the boy who once tore his kilt in battle, the prince who stumbled over ceremonial titles, the young man who was nervous to speak with Nefertari in the palace gardens. That boy is gone. In his place stands Ramses II, Pharaoh of Egypt, chosen of the gods, master of the land between the cataracts and the sea. And somewhere deep within you already know you will not be content to simply rule. You will build, you will conquer. You will leave a name carved so deeply into the world that not even the desert sands can erase it. You rise with the sun, its golden disk, breaking over the eastern horizon, washing the palace in a warm glow that makes every limestone wall shimmer like molten gold. This, you think, is the hour for builders. A pharaoh's true immortality does not come from victories alone, it comes from stone. Victories fade into dusty papyrus scrolls. Monuments stand long after the scribes have turned to dust. Historians still argue whether you were naturally inclined toward building, or whether you simply understood its political power. Either way, once the crook and flail were in your hands, you unleashed what can only be described as an architectural frenzy. Your father's reign had been solid, but relatively modest in construction. You, however, have no intention of leaving Egypt modest. You want the gods themselves to squint when they look down from the heavens. The overseers of works meet you in the colonnaded court, each clutching clay tablets covered in sketches and measurements. They bow low, their voices respectful, but their eyes are wide with both excitement and dread. They know you will push them harder than any ruler in living memory. Temples, statues, cities, everything must be bigger, grander, more awe-inspiring than anything that came before. Your first great commissions rise in Thebes, Karnak and Luxor. You order colossal statues of yourself, some nearly 70 feet tall, so that when travelers approach from miles away, the first thing they see is your face serene and timeless. Your sculptors capture you with the strong jaw, the full lips, the proud gaze of a man who knows he commands the Nile. It's not vanity, you tell yourself. It's a message. Egypt is strong. Egypt is eternal. Egypt is you. One fringe tidbit the temple guides never mention: The workers sometimes carve little hidden jokes into the back of statues, out of sight, from priests and nobles. A crude ibis here, a cat chasing a mouse there. One of your colossi allegedly hides a small hieroglyphic of a man, holding his back, groaning a wink from the stonemason, who hauled blocks for years to make you look immortal. The building sites are a world of their own. You walk among the rows of sweating labourers, their skin gleaming in the sun, the air ringing with the clang of copper chisels and the scrape of sandstone blocks dragged on sledges. Overseers shout orders, scribes note deliveries of timber and stone, and priests sprinkle natron on foundation trenches to bless the ground. You make a point of being seen here often not just to inspect progress, but to show the men that their pharaoh values their toil. In Karnak, you expand the already immense temple of Amun-Ra. New hypostal halls rise like stone forests, their papyrus-shaped columns soaring into the sky. Each one is carved with scenes of your victories, offerings to the gods, and endless repetitions of your names. The sheer scale leaves even seasoned priests speechless. You stroll between the pillars, imagining future generations standing here craning their necks to read the story of your reign in sunlight and shadow. In Abu Simbel, far to the south near the Nubian border, you conceive something unprecedented: temples carved directly into the cliffs. 4 colossal seated statues of yourself will guard the entrance, their gazes fixed eternally on the horizon. You picture travelers arriving by boat, their first glimpse of Egypt's power, being your stone likeness towering above them. The desert sun will bleach your real hair and skin, but the stone Ramses will never fade. The logistics are staggering: stone quarried hundreds of miles away, hauled on barges down the Nile, dragged through sand by teams of oxen and men. You order supply depots built along the routes, wells dug where none existed, even small shrines raised, so the workers can pray without leaving their posts. Nothing must slow the momentum. At Pyrameses, your new capital in the Delta, construction becomes a city-sized obsession. You envision broad avenues lined with palm trees, sprawling palace complexes and storehouses to hold grain for years of famine. Bronze workshops clatter day and night, producing weapons, chariot fittings, and the endless tools needed to keep Egypt's building heart beating. Foreign envoys gape when they visit, half from admiration, half from the subtle warning that only a truly mighty kingdom can afford such excess. Historians still debate whether the pace you set was sustainable, or if it strained Egypt's treasury. You hear the murmurs, of course whispers, that a pharaoh's tomb should not be built before he's lived, but you ignore them. You know that stone is the language of eternity, and you plan to speak fluently. In the evenings you walk the scaffolding, the sun sinking in the west, bathing the half-finished statues in bronze light. You trail your hand along the cool, unpolished stone and feel the power in it, not the power of war, but of permanence. One day your mortal body will be gone, but these walls, these temples, these colossi will still be here, catching the sunrise long after your bones have turned to dust. And as you descend from the scaffolding, the workers stop to bow, some with dust still clinging to their hair, others with chisels in hand. You nod to them, and in that moment you know this is not just about building Egypt's glory. This is about building you into the bedrock of history. The air in the palace war room is thick with heat and murmurs. Wax tablets lie scattered across a cedar table, each marked with neat lines showing the curves of rivers, the ridges of hills, the roads that lead to Kadesh. The city has become the bright thorn in your side, small in size, but great in strategic value. Whoever holds Kadesh controls the gateway between Egypt and the Hittite lands. And right now the Hittites hold it. Historians still argue whether the campaign you are planning is born of ambition, pride, or necessity. Perhaps it is all three. The Hittites have been pressing from the north, strengthening their grip on Syria. You could negotiate, but that would be seen as weakness. And weakness is a scent that drifts quickly on the desert wind. You gather your general's men scarred from decades of war, their linen kilts streaked with dust, their bronze weapons polished to a dull gleam. They stand in a half-circle before you, heads bowed, waiting for your word. You tell them of the planned 4 great divisions, each named for a god, Amun-Ra-Ptah and Set. Each will march north along separate routes, converging on Kadesh like falcons closing in on prey. The scribes scratch furiously to keep pace with your voice. Your wife Nefertari says little in these councils, but you catch her watching the maps with sharp eyes. Later in private she warns you. The Hittites are not like the desert raiders you fought as a boy. They will not break easily, and they will not fight fair. You know she is right, but the thought of holding back is unthinkable. You have statues to live up to now. The army begins its march at dawn. Chariots creak under the weight of shields, and quivers the wheels bound in bronze to bite into the earth. Columns of infantry tramp in the dust, their spears upright, their sandals slapping the packed dirt in unison. The banners of the gods ripple in the breeze, catching the early light. You ride at the head of the Amun division, the largest and strongest, your chariot polished to a golden shine. One fringe tidbit: the temple inscriptions will never admit the baggage trains for this campaign are enormous, carrying not just weapons and rations, but folding beds for officers, baskets of dried figs, and dates amphorae of beer and wine, even trained monkeys to amuse the troops during long marches. War is misery, but morale is everything. The days stretch into weeks. You pass fields of ripening barley villages that empty to watch the army go by, wide stretches of steppe, where the only sound is the wind in the grass. Scouts bring word of the Hittites' movements, sometimes close, sometimes vanishing into the north. You suspect deception. Near the Orontes River, the land begins to change. The green of Egypt is long behind you. Here, the earth is red and stony, the air sharp with the scent of pine from distant hills. You halt to rest the men, sending word for the other divisions to close the distance. It is here, in the quiet before the storm, that the weight of command presses hardest. You stand by the river, watching it curl away into the haze, and wonder whether the gods have already chosen the victor. The night before the final march, you walk through the camp. Fires crackle, throwing orange light on the faces of soldiers, sharpening blades, repairing sandals, or simply staring into the flames. They nod to you as you pass, some offering quick words of blessing. You pause at the chariot park, running your hand over the smooth wood of your own vehicle. The horses shift under your touch, their breath warm in the cool night. You sleep lightly. At first light, the army stirs again, the sound of 100 fires being stamped out, mingling with the clank of bronze and the rumble of wheels. You mount your chariot, the crook of your bow familiar against your palm. Ahead lies Kadesh, its walls hidden beyond the bends of the river, and beyond those walls, the Hittite army waiting. Historians still debate whether you underestimated your enemy that morning, or whether the gods simply chose to test you. Either way, by the end of the day, your name will be forever tied to this place, etched in triumph and in warning for every pharaoh who comes after you. The sun climbs quickly, its heat pressing down like an invisible hand as your chariot wheels rattle over the packed earth. The Orontes River glitters to your left, its banks lined with reeds swaying gently in the breeze. The Amun division moves at a steady pace, soldiers laughing, chatting confident in the belief that the Hittites are still far away. Historians still argue whether it was overconfidence, faulty scouting, or deliberate deception that set the trap. 2 men appear on the road ahead, dusty and disheveled, claiming to be deserters from the Hittite army. They tell you a story that seems too good to be true. The Hittites have retreated far to the north, fearing your approach. They speak with convincing fear, their voices trembling, their eyes darting nervously. The scouts swear their story is genuine. You decide to push forward quickly, hoping to seize Kadesh before the other divisions even arrive. The city's mud brick walls rise in the distance, the sun gleaming off their battlements. The air is dry, the only sound the creak of chariot axles and the flap of banners overhead. But the truth crashes upon you like a flood. As your column approaches the city, dust clouds swirl on the horizon, far too many for a mere rearguard. Suddenly, the ground shakes with the thunder of hooves. From behind the ridges and river bends, Hittite chariots pour forth like a bronze tide, their warriors shouting in harsh guttural cries. They are on you before your men can form a proper line. Your vanguard scatters under the impact, horses rearing chariots, splintering spearmen tumbling to the ground. The enemy's chariots are heavier than yours, built for smashing through ranks, each carrying 3 warriors, a driver, a shield bearer, and a spearman. They slam into your forces with terrifying force. You feel the surge of panic ripple through your men. Arrows hiss past your ears, one glancing off your shield, with a jolt that numbs your arm. A driverless chariot careens past one wheel, shattered the horse, screaming as it crashes into a supply cart. The air fills with the chaotic symphony of war, clashing bronze. The whinny of terrified animals, the cries of the wounded. You have a choice: retreat to regroup with the other divisions, or hold the line and risk annihilation. You choose neither. You grip your bow, shouting to your driver to drive straight into the chaos. If the line is breaking, you will be the wedge that drives it back together. Your chariot wheels bounce over rough ground, each jolt threatening to throw you into the melee. You fire arrow after arrow, the strings singing against your fingertips. A Hittite chariot veers towards you, its spearman raising his weapon. At the last moment, your driver swerves sharply. You lean into the motion, loosing an arrow that drops the man mid-stride. The battlefield is a blur. You wheel your chariot toward the thickest fighting where your men are being pressed against the riverbank. Stand for Amun. You shout, your voice raw. You catch the eyes of a young spearman on the verge of fleeing. He freezes, then plants his feet, lowering his spear. Others rally around him. One fringe detail you will never see in the official temple reliefs: at some point in the charge, a runaway pack mule barrels between 2 chariots, scattering both friend and foe. For a heartbeat, the absurdity nearly makes you laugh. But the moment passes in a flash of steel and dust. The clash grinds on. You can feel the heat building under your helmet, sweat stinging your eyes. A chariot wheel snaps nearby, its axle groaning before the whole frame collapses in a heap. A wounded soldier stumbles past you, clutching his arm, his face pale beneath the grime. You want to stop to pull him onto your chariot, but the tide of battle won't allow it. Then a distant sound, a low rhythmic rumble. At first you think it is your imagination, but the sound swells until it is unmistakable, the drums and horns of the Tar division. Your reinforcements are thundering toward the field. The Hittites, momentarily thrown off balance, falter. You seize the moment. Driving hard into their flank, you and your men push them back step by step. It is not a rout, far from it, but the worst of the collapse is averted. The battle is not won yet, neither is it lost. As the sun sinks toward the west, the fighting slows. Both armies withdraw to lick their wounds. You stand in your chariot chest, heaving eyes fixed on the city of Kadesh, still stubbornly in Hittite hands. Today was no victory, but Egypt still stands. And so do you. Historians still debate whether your decision to charge alone was reckless bravado, or the act that saved your army. Either way, the scribes will make sure it is carved in stone that Ramses the Great stood like a lion amid the storm. The camp settles into an uneasy stillness that night, but sleep will not come easily. The fires burn low, casting jittering shadows on the tent walls. The smell of sweat blood and horse lingers heavy in the air. Men speak in hushed tones about the day's chaos, some swearing the gods themselves had turned the dust into a blinding storm. Others simply stare into the embers, silent, replaying the moment they thought all was lost. You sit at a table lit by a single oil lamp, wax tablets spread before you. The recorders hover nearby, ready to note your account. You begin dictating, voice steadied though you are still scraped raw from the shock. Historians still argue whether the words you speak now are calculated propaganda, or simply the truth, as you see it, that you, Ramses, charged into the heart of the enemy alone, driving them back by sheer force of will. The scribes' styluses scratch across the wax, preserving your version of events. They do not record the moments of panic, the torn ranks, the near misses with enemy spears. Instead, they shape a tale worthy of temple walls, a pharaoh abandoned by his allies, standing like a falcon against a flood of jackals, saved only by the favor of the god Amun. By morning, the relief artists are already sketching scenes for the great carvings that will decorate your temples. You watch as they outline towering images of yourself in a chariot bow, drawn enemies tumbling like wheat before the scythe. You are twice the height of your soldiers, 3 times the height of the Hittites. Accuracy is less important than majesty. One fringe detail the stonecutters quietly enjoy. When they carve the defeated Hittites, they exaggerate their noses and chins to make them look almost comical. A little extra humiliation in every scene. You make sure the inscriptions name the other divisions, but only in passing. It will be remembered as your victory, even though Kadesh itself remains stubbornly beyond your grasp. You give speeches to the men, thanking them for their courage, promising that Egypt will not rest until the Hittites are driven back. You know the truth, the battle was no clear triumph. But Egypt cannot afford the appearance of weakness. Over the following weeks, the campaign continues in fits and starts. Raids, skirmishes, and tense standoffs play out in the hills and river valleys. Neither side delivers a final crushing blow. The heat bakes the land into a pale, cracked shell. Water is rationed, rations grow monotonous, tempers fray. The Hittites remain just out of reach, like a hawk's shadow on the desert floor, always moving, never caught. Finally, both armies withdraw. The lines are unchanged, but the story will be different. In Egypt, you will be the hero king who fought alone at Kadesh, defeating a host of Hittites through valor and divine favor. In Hatti, their scribes will write of how their king stood firm against the mighty Ramses, halting Egypt's advance. 2 versions of the same day, each carved into history as gospel. When you return to Egypt, the temples are ready to sing your praises. At Karnak, colossal reliefs show you pulling your bowstring to its full length, enemies scattering in every direction. At Abu Simbel, the same scenes are etched deep into stone, their scale making you seem as eternal as the cliffs themselves. Nefertari greets you at the palace gates, her eyes searching yours as you step from the chariot. You tell her the campaign was a success, and she smiles in the way only someone who knows you can, half believing, half questioning. That night, as the city feasts in your honor, you feel the strange mix of pride and unease that only a survivor knows. Historians still debate whether Kadesh was a draw or a defeat, but for you, the truth is simpler. Egypt's army marched north, fought the Hittites, and returned alive. That was enough. And now the story, your story, will live forever in the stone. The months after Kadesh are filled with messages carried by weary envoys, their sandals powdered with dust from the long road between Thebes and Hattusa. War has drained both kingdoms. Egypt's coffers feel the strain, and the Hittite grain stores run dangerously low. Neither of you can claim a decisive victory, yet neither wishes to admit it. Somewhere between pride and exhaustion, the thought of a lasting accord begins to take root. Historians still argue whether the push for peace came first from Egypt or from the Hittites. Some say your scribes were the ones who suggested it discreetly. Others claim it was the Hittite king, who realized 2 decades of on-again, off-again conflict was bleeding his borders dry. What is certain is that the earliest proposals arrived wrapped in politeness and suspicion in equal measure. The negotiations begin through letters formal, florid, and endlessly repetitive. Each is addressed to my brother in carefully chosen hieroglyphs and cuneiform. You exchange pleasantries about health, family, and the favor of the gods, always circling the real issue: who will yield first. Your scribes, long accustomed to embellishing military dispatches, now take pride in their ability to turn diplomatic language into a kind of verbal chess. Finally, the idea crystallizes a treaty unlike any the ancient world has seen. Its terms are ambitious. Both powers pledge not to attack each other, to aid one another if attacked by a third party, and to extradite fugitives who flee across borders. For a world accustomed to endless cycles of vengeance, it is a radical notion. One fringe tidbit during these exchanges, a minor but oddly heated dispute, breaks out over the exact order in which each king's titles should be written in the treaty. Weeks are spent haggling over whether beloved of the gods should precede mighty ruler or the other way around. In the end, both sides agree to list themselves first in their own copies of the treaty, an ancient version of "you get your version, I get mine." Envoys travel back and forth for months carrying gifts meant to sweeten the talks: gold jewelry, fine linen, exotic animals. The Hittites send hunting dogs, massive creatures with thick necks and sharp eyes. Egypt sends leopard skins, jars of perfumed oil, and delicately inlaid ivory boxes. Each gift says, "We are powerful enough to give away what others covet." When the treaty is finally agreed upon, it is inscribed in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Akkadian cuneiform, the diplomatic lingua franca of the time. The clay and silver versions will be kept in the great temples of each kingdom. The Egyptians will carve their version deep into the stone walls of Karnak, where future generations will read it as both political triumph and divine blessing. The day of ratification is one of ceremony and spectacle. In the forecourt of Karnak, priests in white linen stand in precise rows, their shaven heads gleaming in the sun. You hold the treaty as if it were a sacred relic, its words promising not only peace, but the possibility of friendship between 2 great empires. Trumpets sound, the crowd murmurs, and the gods are invoked as witnesses. Historians still debate whether this peace was truly secure or merely convenient. Yet for you, the moment feels monumental. You have stood at the brink of disaster at Kadesh, and now stand on the threshold of an alliance that could endure for decades. It is a reminder that victory is not always won on the battlefield. Sometimes it is carved into clay, sealed with a handshake, and sung by temple choirs. That night, Thebes erupts in celebration. Torches line the avenues, dancers whirl in the torchlight, and the wine flows like the Nile at flood. Children chase each other between the colonnades, their laughter mingling with the beat of drums. You stand with Nefertari at the palace balcony, watching the city glow. The wind carries the scent of roasting goose and sweet lotus wine. For the first time in years, you allow yourself to imagine a season without war, a time to turn your gaze back to the building of Egypt, to the strengthening of her borders through diplomacy, rather than the sword. The treaty is more than a piece of parchment. It is the first stone in a bridge between 2 worlds long divided. One day, centuries from now, scholars will dig from the sands the baked clay tablets of your treaty, marvel at its survival, and call it one of the earliest known peace accords in history. But tonight, under the stars of Thebes, it is simply the work of two weary kings who have chosen to trade bloodshed for ink. Peace with the Hittites brings more than a sigh of relief. It brings time. Time to turn inward to the heart of your court, where politics wears a gentler mask, but can be just as sharp as a Hittite spear. And in the center of that heart is Nefertari. She is no longer merely the great royal wife by title. She is the living embodiment of Egypt's queenly ideal. Historians still argue whether your devotion to her was unique among pharaohs or simply more extravagantly expressed. Many kings had favored wives, but few inscribed their love so deeply into stone. You commission statues where she stands beside you, as your equal, not behind you. You have her image carved on temple walls, making offerings to the gods, her name wrapped in a royal cartouche, as though she too shares in your divine authority. You speak of her beauty, often eyes like black coal-lined pools, skin like the pale gold of new wheat, but it is her mind that you value most. She reads people with unnerving accuracy, catching the flicker of a lie before the liar has even finished speaking. You consult her on matters of diplomacy, and more than once her counsel prevents you from making an enemy where you might have been tempted to. Your letters to her when you travel are unlike the stiff formalities exchanged between most royal couples. You write of the sunsets over the desert, of the sound of the river against the hull of your boat, of the taste of figs eaten still warm from the sun. You tell her she is the one who fills my heart with joy, my sister, my beloved, borrowing the intimate language of love poetry, rather than the cold phrases of court protocol. One fringe tidbit the scribes will never etch. During one long absence, you send her a necklace of golden lapis shaped like lotus blooms. According to gossip among the palace servants, she laughs when she first sees it and says, "I will wear it." So he remembers to come back before the blossoms fade. You commission a temple for her at Abu Simbel, smaller than your own, but no less elegant, with statues of her flanking the entrance. The inscription proclaims her for whom the sun rises, a phrase that for once even the most cynical courtier cannot dismiss as mere flattery. Life in the palace seems gentler in these years. There are festivals where you sit together in gilded chairs while dancers spin and acrobats leap through hoops of fire. There are quiet mornings where you walk the palace gardens, pausing to watch ibises stalk the shallows of the lotus ponds. In the evenings, you dine on roasted goose honey cakes and wine, talking until the servants discreetly withdraw. But even in peace, the court is a hive of undercurrents. Lesser wives and their families jostle for influence, hoping their sons might one day edge closer to the throne. Viziers court your favor with flattery, generals press for new campaigns to keep their soldiers sharp. Through it all, Nefertari remains your constant, steady perceptive, and unafraid to tell you when your pride is getting the better of you. Historians still debate whether your displays of affection were purely personal, or a calculated act to show Egypt and the wider world that the royal household was united and strong. But as you sit beside her during temple festivals, the two of you framed by columns, and the slow rhythm of incense smoke calculation seems far from your mind. One night after a feast in her honor, you stand together on a balcony overlooking Thebes. The city sprawls below in quiet lamplight, the Nile gleaming like a dark ribbon under the stars. She leans against you, her hand in yours, and says, "One day they will speak of us in the same breath." You smile at the thought. Pharaoh and queen carved in stone, sung in hymns remembered together. And perhaps she is right, not because you will have it so, but because you cannot imagine it being otherwise. The palace may be all polished limestone and perfumed air, but beneath its gleam lies a constant thrum of tension. Egypt's heart beats not just in its temples and fields, but in the whispered corridors where servants carry trays and secrets with equal care. Peace with the Hittites has cooled the roar of war, yet the intrigues of home burn on like banked embers. Historians still argue whether your reign's domestic stability was the product of your skill, Nefertari's influence, or the sheer momentum of Egypt's prosperity. In truth, all three weave together like the cords of a chariot harness. The nobility enjoy the wealth flowing from your building projects and foreign trade, but they are not blind to opportunity. Old families proud of their ancient bloodlines nurse ambitions that stretch just shy of treason. In the women's quarters, the lesser wives play their own games. Some have been in the palace for years. Others are recent arrivals from noble houses or foreign courts, sent as living tokens of alliance. Each knows her standing depends not on her beauty alone, but on the number and quality of sons she bears. Their families send gifts, advice, and on occasion whispers into your ear about why their child is uniquely suited to inherit Egypt's double crown. You walk these halls with the patience of a man navigating a crocodile-filled river. A kind smile here, a gracious nod there, a quiet word of thanks for a well-timed gift. You avoid giving too much favor to any one house. To do so would invite a swarm of resentment. Still, you cannot help but notice which courtiers seem to linger at certain doors, or which gifts arrive without explanation. One fringe tidbit that will never be carved on a temple wall: once, after a particularly tense banquet, you discover that two rival noble families have both sent you identical ivory game boards as tokens of loyalty. You keep them both, but make a point of playing neither in public lest you be accused of choosing sides in a match you never agreed to play. Beyond the palace walls, the bureaucracy hums like a well-oiled mill. Scribes track grain harvests with the precision of priests counting sacred offerings. Overseers monitor the flow of goods along the Nile, making sure merchants pay their due. Tax collectors tramp from village to village, their ledgers as feared as any spear. A single bad flood could turn loyalty to unrest, but the Nile remains generous. The fields are heavy with barley, the fishermen bring in nets sagging with perch and mullet, and Egypt prospers. Yet prosperity can breed its own kind of unrest. Ambitious governors in distant nomes push for more autonomy, disguising their desires as efficiency. A temple here requests an unusual amount of gold for repairs. A military garrison there expands its walls without official orders. You weigh each case carefully, mindful that a heavy hand could turn quiet ambition into open defiance. Nefertari's counsel proves invaluable here. She listens where you cannot at a feast, during women's gatherings, through servants who owe their loyalty to her. She warns you which nobles grow restless, which generals' pride outweighs their loyalty. Together you steer the court, like a great ship, correcting its drift before it founders. Historians still debate whether the absence of serious rebellion during your reign was luck or skill. Perhaps it was both. But you know that every smooth-running year is the product of endless quiet decisions, whose request to grant, whose insult to ignore, whose ambition to quietly smother. One evening, after hearing yet another petition from a governor who clearly wants more than he says, you retreat to the gardens. The air smells of night-blooming jasmine, the moonlight glinting on the still surface of the lotus ponds. Nefertari joins you, her bare feet silent on the stone path. "The game never ends," she says softly. You nod, knowing she is not speaking of Senet or Mehen, but of rulership itself. The stars wheel overhead steady and eternal, while below them Egypt shifts with the unseen currents of human ambition. You are Pharaoh, master of the two lands, but you are also a player in a game that began long before you and will outlast even your monuments. The trick you have learned is to make sure you are always the one moving the final piece. The longer you sit on the throne, the more you find yourself leaning into the role the priests and poets have been crafting for you since birth. Ramses, the god king, not merely Pharaoh, but a living manifestation of Horus on earth, son of Ra, chosen to keep the two lands in perfect balance. The titles sound grand in ceremony, but in practice, they are as much a tool as a crown or a chariot. Historians still argue whether you truly believed you were divine, or whether you wore divinity, like a ceremonial robe, slipping it on for the benefit of others, knowing its power to command loyalty. The truth may be somewhere in between. You know you are mortal. You feel it in the ache of your shoulders after a day in the saddle, in the sting of a cut from a careless slip of the blade. But you also know that your image as God King holds Egypt together, like the Nile's banks hold back the flood. The temples help you maintain this living myth. At Karnak, priests chant your names at dawn, midday, and sunset, offering incense to your Ka, your divine essence. At Luxor, colossal statues of you sit enthroned before towering pylons, watching over the city like a stone-faced sentinel. In Memphis, sacred scribes record your deeds, as if they were the will of the gods themselves, each word inked with deliberate reverence. You are careful to be seen performing the most sacred rites yourself, making offerings to Amun, pouring libations for Osiris, burning incense to Hathor. These moments are never private. The crowd must see, the scribes must record, the stonemasons must carve. You are not simply honoring the gods, you are reminding Egypt that the gods live through you. One fringe detail the temple records omit during one elaborate festival of Ra. Your ceremonial beard, carefully tied on for the occasion, slipped halfway loose during the final hymn. A quick-thinking priest pretended it was an intentional blessing from the sun god. The crowd bowed deeper, murmuring thanks for this omen. You played along, nodding gravely, though you could feel the smile tugging at your lips. Your likeness becomes the official face of piety. Reliefs show you standing taller than the gods you serve, not to diminish them, but to remind mortals that you walk in their company. On temple walls, you are forever youthful, broad-shouldered, with a jaw that could cut papyrus. Time cannot touch you in stone. The priests understand the bargain, they sanctify your rule, and you lavish their temples with gold, land, and labor. When the Nile floods well, it is because the god king has pleased the gods. When the harvest is rich, it is a sign of your divine favor. Even the rare poor flood is framed as a test sent by the gods to challenge your wisdom. Historians still debate whether this was sincere devotion or the most sophisticated state propaganda of the ancient world, but sincerity hardly matters to the farmer who sees your image carved into the doorway of his village shrine, or to the soldier who carries a small amulet bearing your cartouche into battle. To them, you are the divine protector whose shadow shields Egypt. Festivals reinforce this image. During Opet, you process from Karnak to Luxor in a golden bark, the air alive with music, incense, and the chant of thousands. People line the streets to glimpse you, some holding children aloft, so they may see the god king pass, others touching the ground where your sandals tread. The smell of roasting meat drifts over the crowd, mingling with the sweet burn of frankincense. You stand beneath a gilded canopy, smiling with the calm of one who knows he is not just ruling Egypt, he is Egypt. In quieter moments, you walk the temple courts at dusk, the fading sunlight painting the sandstone in shades of amber and rose. You pause before your own statues, gazing into the unblinking eyes. There is a strange comfort in them. They will not age, they will not falter. They will always remember you as the god king you have become, even when your bones lie deep beneath the earth. And perhaps that is the real divinity, not immortality in the flesh, but the power to be remembered exactly as you wish for, as long as stone endures. The desert sun blazes over the Nubian cliffs, painting them in deep ochre and gold. You stand at the base of what will be one of your greatest creations, the temples of Abu Simbel. Even among your countless monuments, this one will be a statement to the gods, to your people, and to anyone who dares test Egypt's might. Ramses the Great is not only pharaoh of the Nile, but master of the desert itself. Historians still argue whether you chose Abu Simbel purely for its strategic position near the Nubian border, or because you wanted a monument so remote it would seem touched only by the hands of the gods. Whatever your reasoning, the location is as dramatic as your vision. The cliffs rise like the walls of a giant's fortress, their faces glowing in the sun. You imagine them carved into colossal likenesses of yourself, 4 seated guardians towering nearly 70 feet high, gazing forever across the sands. The work begins with a frenzy. Teams of quarrymen chip into the cliff face, with copper chisels, their rhythmic strikes echoing like drumbeats against stone. Architects calculate angles so the sun will reach deep into the temple's heart twice a year, illuminating the sanctuary, where statues of the gods and you will sit in eternal council. Rope haulers strain against the weight of sandstone blocks, their feet digging furrows in the dust. The overseers shout orders in a chorus that never stops. One fringed tidbit you will never see on temple inscriptions: workers sometimes carve tiny personal marks, names, jokes, or even crude little animals on blocks before they are hoisted into place. Most are hidden forever within the structure, unseen by any but the men who place them there. Somewhere deep inside Abu Simbel, there may be a sandstone block with a mason's self-portrait grinning like he's in on a secret that will outlast dynasties. Years pass, but the vision takes shape. The 4 colossal statues rise slowly from the rock, their knees as high as a house, their faces serene and unyielding. From the river, they seem to emerge from the cliffs themselves, as if the mountain decided to remember you in its own image. Boatmen on the Nile turn their heads in awe as they pass, some murmuring prayers, others simply staring with their mouths open. Inside the temple's halls stretch back into shadow, their walls covered with scenes of your victories and offerings to the gods. Columns shaped like Osirid figures, your own form merged with the god of the afterlife, stand in solemn rows, holding up the stone ceiling as though nothing short of eternity could bring them down. The sanctuary glows in the dim light of oil lamps, where statues of Ra Harakti, Ta Amun, and yourself wait for the touch of the sun. Twice each year, on dates carefully chosen by your astronomers, the first rays of dawn pierce the temple's entrance and travel the length of the hall. They fall directly on the faces of the gods and yours, while leaving Ta, god of the underworld, in shadow. Crowds gather to watch, their breath catching, as the light slides across the stone, as if the sun itself bends to honor you. Historians still debate whether this alignment was intentional or an astonishing coincidence. You know the truth, of course. Nothing in your monuments is accidental. Outside the smaller temple dedicated to Nefertari takes shape beside your own. Its facade is adorned with statues of her nearly as tall as the ones of you, an honor almost unheard of for a queen. The inscription above calls her "for whom the sun rises." It is more than flattery, it is a declaration that she stands beside you not only in life, but in eternity. When the work is finally complete, you stand before the temples at sunset. The sandstone glows as if lit from within the colossal faces, gazing calmly across the desert. The river reflects them in shimmering gold, as if Ra himself has chosen to double the gift. Priests chant hymns, incense drifts in slow coils, and the people cheer until their voices echo off the cliffs. In that moment, you feel the permanence of what you have built. Long after your reign ends, long after your bones lie wrapped in linen deep in the earth, Abu Simbel will still stand. The sun will still pierce its heart twice a year, and the statues will still look out across the desert with the same calm certainty you feel now. Ramses the Great endures. If Abu Simbel is a testament to your ambition, your palace life is a testament to your prolific nature. For while kings before you have had many children, none in living memory can match the dynastic flood you unleash upon Egypt. Sons and daughters fill the palace halls, the gardens, the tutors' chambers, so many that even the scribes sometimes lose count. Historians still argue over the exact number. Some records suggest over 100 children. Others suspect the figure was inflated by the temple scribes, who delighted in your abundance as a sign of divine favor. Regardless of the tally, your family is a living dynasty in itself, a web of bloodlines stretching from the Delta to Nubia. The palace nursery is a kingdom within the kingdom. Nurses bustle through its colonnades carrying swaddled infants with kohl-rimmed eyes. Toddlers chase each other between painted pillars, while patient tutors attempt to teach the older ones their first hieroglyphs. The walls are bright with images of lotus flowers, ducks, and playful cats, gentle reminders that even the children of God should laugh. One fringe detail the scribes never bother to record. Every now and then a toddler escapes the nursery entirely toddling into the great audience hall mid-petition. Courtiers stifle their laughter as you pause the proceedings to scoop up the runaway and hand them back to a flustered nurse. Your children are more than heirs. They are diplomatic tools. Daughters are married into noble houses and foreign courts, strengthening ties as surely as any treaty. Sons are given military commands, priestly roles, or administrative posts across the two lands. A few display real talent, keen minds for strategy, a steady hand in governance. Others seem content to enjoy the privileges of their birth, drifting through life in a haze of banquets and fine linen. Nefertari's children hold special favor in your heart. Their education is meticulous tutors, drilling them in mathematics, poetry, military arts, and the rituals that bind Egypt's divine order. You expect them to serve the state to stand as living proof that your bloodline is both noble and capable. Yet you also allow moments of softness. You have been seen kneeling in the gardens to help a child weave flowers into a garland, or sitting cross-legged on the palace floor while little ones climb over your lap. The challenge of such a sprawling family is keeping rivalries in check. Lesser wives naturally champion their own children, whispering in ears, jockeying for attention. You hear the occasional murmur of ambition claims that this son is wiser, that son braver, that daughter more worthy of an honored match. You keep the peace with the same skill you use in diplomacy, praising without promising rewarding, without committing, making each child feel valued, while quietly steering the succession toward your chosen heir. Historians still debate whether you favored one son above all from the beginning, or if your choice shifted over time. Some believe your eldest son Amun, her Khepeshef, was always destined to inherit his position, reinforced by his early military service at your side. Others think the question remained open far longer with the palace, watching closely for signs of your decision. In public festivals, your children appear in carefully choreographed order, sons in chariots beside you, daughters walking with their mothers in processions. The sight is as much a political message as a family gathering. Egypt will not lack heirs. The divine bloodline is secure. And yet amid the pomp, there are moments that feel simply human. A boy slipping you a carved toy he made himself. A daughter leaning in to whisper a joke during a solemn ceremony. The pride you feel watching a son return from campaign dusty and sunburned but triumphant. In the cool evenings the palace gardens fill with their voices. You sometimes stand at a balcony and listen to them shouts from a game of Senate laughter by the lotus pool. The occasional wail of a scraped knee. It is a soundscape unlike any battle or building project, yet it too feels like the work of a lifetime. Because long after the temples weather and the monuments fade, it will be these sons and daughters and their sons and daughters who carry the name Ramses into the next age, and that perhaps is a monument of its own. Even as your children fill the palace halls and your monuments rise from the sands, there is a restlessness in your bones that peace cannot quite soothe. The Nile may feed Egypt, the temples may honor you, but the desert winds still whisper of far horizons. And so, even in your later years, you turn your gaze outward toward foreign adventures that will remind the world that Egypt's lion still roars. Historians still argue whether these twilight campaigns were born of necessity or pure pride. Some claim threats from Libya-Nubia and restless Canaanite vassals demanded swift action. Others see them as demonstrations, carefully staged shows of power, meant to keep Egypt's neighbors from thinking the aging pharaoh had grown complacent. Whatever the truth, your war chariots are readied once more, the bronze fittings polish, the quivers restocked. The first rumblings come from the west. Libyan tribes, nimble and unpredictable, cross into the delta, raiding outlying settlements. You ride north with a force of seasoned veterans and fresh recruits, the desert wind carrying the scent of tamarisk and salt from the nearby sea. The Libyans melt before your advance, retreating into the scrub, striking and vanishing like jackals. You push them back across the border, erecting fortified posts to remind them that Egypt's western flank is still well guarded. Then comes trouble to the south. Nubia, long under Egypt's influence, stirs with rebellion in pockets along the Nile. You take the royal barge upriver, its painted prow cutting through the blue water, flanked by long lines of troop transports. The cliffs close in, dotted with the tombs of earlier pharaohs, silent witnesses to the eternal rhythm of conquest and reconquest. One fringe tidbit: the temple reliefs will not record your soldiers in Nubia. Develop a fondness for a local beer brewed from sorghum. It is strong, cloudy, and judging by the campfire songs, dangerously good at lowering the discipline of even your most loyal men. You quietly order the quartermasters to ration it before your mighty army begins to stagger more than march. In Canaan, old vassals test their limits. Some refuse tribute, convinced Egypt's grip has weakened. You answer with the swiftness of a desert hawk. Chariots thunder through the passes, banners snapping in the wind, as fortified towns open their gates rather than face siege. In the marketplaces of Gaza and Ashkelon, merchants bow low and hurry to offer grain, copper, and incense, their eyes measuring the steel in yours. These campaigns are not the long, grueling wars of your youth. They are flashes of lightning, swift strikes meant to remind every border that Egypt is still a storm no one wishes to provoke. You ride at the head of your army, not with the reckless eagerness of a young prince, but with the measured assurance of a ruler who knows the value of appearing unstoppable. Historians still debate how much of this was actual necessity and how much was theatre. Yet the results are undeniable. Egypt's borders remain secure, its tribute flows steadily, and your name is once again whispered along caravan routes from Byblos to the oases of Libya. One evening, camped near the coast, after a brief skirmish, you stand with your officers watching the sun sink into the sea. The waves catch the light like molten gold, and for a moment you feel the same thrill you did as a boy, looking out across the desert on your first campaign. But there is a difference now. You no longer chase glory for its own sake. You claim it because it belongs to you, because it has always belonged to you. When you finally return to Thebes, the people greet you as they always have, with music, flowers, and cries of life, prosperity, health. The streets are lined with fresh palm fronds, the air scented with myrrh. Nefertari meets you at the palace steps, her smile touched with relief. You step into the cool shadow of the colonnade, the roar of the crowd fading behind you, and for the first time in months, you feel the weight of home settle on your shoulders again. These late campaigns have reminded Egypt and yourself that Ramses the Great is not a ruler who fades quietly into age. You will leave the world knowing your name was spoken with respect, with fear, and with the understanding that even in twilight, the lion's roar could shake the sands. The years begin to weigh on you, though you would never admit it aloud. The mornings come slower now, your limbs stiffer, the heat of the day clinging to you longer than it once did. You have ruled for decades longer than many of your generals have lived, and the line between man and legend has blurred so much that you sometimes wonder if there is any difference left. Historians still argue whether you truly feared death, or saw it merely as the next chapter of a king's duty. You've walked in temples filled with the scent of myrrh and sandalwood, under ceilings painted like the night sky, hearing priests speak of the eternal fields, where kings walk forever in youth. Yet you've also seen the frailty of flesh, the cough that will not leave an old general's chest, the tremor in the hand of a priest, too proud to admit he can no longer hold the incense burner steady. Your days are quieter now, but never idle. You still receive envoys in the audience hall, still walk the colonnades of Karnak during festivals, still stand at the prow of the royal barge when you travel upriver. But there is a deliberateness to your steps, a greater awareness of time passing. You pause longer before statues, run your fingers more slowly over carved hieroglyphs, watch the play of sunlight on temple walls, as though memorizing it for another life. You spend more time with your children and grandchildren, gathering them in shaded gardens or cool audience chambers. The little ones climb onto your lap, tugging at your beard, demanding stories of lions, gods, and battles. The older ones stand respectfully at your side, listening as you speak of the Nile's cycles, the art of ruling, the necessity of patience. You can see the different seeds you planted in each of them. Courage in one, diplomacy in another, ambition in perhaps too many. One fringe detail the scribes will never record during one such gathering. A small grandson brings you a clay figurine. He made himself a crude little chariot with wheels that don't quite turn. He says it's you, riding into the sky to fight the clouds. You laugh so hard that you nearly spill your wine, and you keep the figure on a small table beside your bed. The court moves more gently around you now. Ministers speak with an extra shade of deference, aware that your word will shape not only the present, but the Egypt your successor inherits. Nefertari's presence, whether in person or in memory, remains a source of strength. You visit her temple at Abu Simbel, more often standing in the shadow of her statues, until the wind off the desert cools your skin. Historians still debate the extent of your health in these final active years. Some accounts describe you as vigorous to the end. Others hint at ailments kept carefully hidden. Whatever the truth, you make sure the public never sees weakness. At festivals you appear in full regalia, crook and flail in hand. Your posture as straight as the statues carved in your image. In the evenings you walk the palace gardens under a canopy of stars. The night air smells of lotus, and river reeds the water in the pools, catching the moonlight like polished silver. You think of the path you've walked, from golden child to crown prince, from warrior to builder, from god king to elder statesman. Few men can claim such a journey. Fewer still have walked it for so long. And in quiet moments, you begin to prepare not just the tomb that will hold your body, but the memory that will hold your name. You have seen kings whose monuments have crumbled, whose cartouches have been chiseled away by rivals. You will not be one of them. Your story will be carved into cliffs, written in temples, whispered in the marketplaces, taught in the schools of scribes. Because even as the years slow your body, one truth remains unshaken. Ramses the Great is not merely a king of Egypt. Ramses is Egypt, and Egypt will endure. The palace is quiet in the late summer heat. The courtyards shimmer under the glare of the sun, and the only movement is the soft sway of palm fronds along the garden paths. You feel the years heavy upon you now, a weight no crown can lighten. Even so, you rise each morning to the slow chant of priests offering incense, the murmur of servants preparing your chamber, the rustle of linen robes. Historians still argue about your exact age in these final days. Some say you ruled for 66 years, others shave a few off, but all agree that your reign has stretched longer than the lives of most who served you. Generations have known no other pharaoh. Children born in your first years on the throne are grey-haired elders, now their grandchildren chanting your name at festivals. You know your time is drawing short. The physicians bring infusions of herbs to ease your breath, amulets of turquoise and gold to guard your car, gentle songs to lull you into rest. Your body feels slower, but your mind still roams far to the clamour of Kadesh, the chisel ring of builders at Abu Simbel, the laughter of your children racing through palace gardens. In the nights when the moon spills silver through the colonnades, you wander the halls alone. Your hand trails over the cool stone, feeling the carved hieroglyphs like old friends. You pause before statues of yourself, ageless, unyielding, and feel the strange split between the man you are and the god-king they will remember. One fringe moment no scribe will set in stone. A young palace guard once asked you quietly if you feared death. You told him no. I have built too much of myself into Egypt for it to let me go. He nodded, perhaps not fully understanding, but comforted all the same. The priests have prepared your tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Its corridors dive deep into the earth, painted with scenes of your journey through the Duat, the underworld. There you sail on the solar bark beside Ra, defeat the serpent Apophis, and rise reborn with the dawn. The treasures of your reign, gold, alabaster, lapis, await you, offerings for eternity. On the final morning, the palace is hushed. The cool breath of the Nile drifts through open shutters, carrying the faint scent of lotus. You feel it is time. The crook and flail rest near your bed, symbols of a lifetime's reign. Servants and priests gather quietly, their eyes downcast. Somewhere in the distance, the temple drums begin a slow, steady rhythm, as if keeping time with your own heart. You close your eyes and breathe in Egypt one last time, the heat of the desert, the smell of river silt, the murmur of prayers, the echo of chariot wheels on stone. Your car will travel on. Your body will return to the earth you ruled. And your name, Ramses the Great, will remain on every temple, every pylon, every carved pillar that touches the sky. Historians still debate the details of your passing, but all agree your funeral was a spectacle fit for a god. Priests in leopard skin cloaks chanted spells. Processions carried your sarcophagus through incense-clouded air, and mourners wailed as the sun dipped low. You were placed in your tomb with the care of one sealing a sacred pact. And so you began your eternal reign, not as a man of flesh and bone, but as a name and memory, a god-king whose shadow stretches across the centuries. Now, as the echoes of Ramses' story fade, the night folds around you like a soft linen shroud. The Nile flows on in the distance, its current steady and unhurried, carrying moonlight on its rippling back. Imagine yourself standing on its bank, the air warm, and still the smell of lotus flowers drifting past. Stars wheel slowly above each one, a silent witness to the ages. In your mind's eye, you see the great temples, their columns bathed in pale light, the colossal statues gazing out over the sands. They stand unchanging, just as they have for thousands of years, just as they will for thousands more. Between their shadows, quiet courtyards open into gardens, where the night air is rich with the scent of myrrh and jasmine. Your breathing slows. The world narrows to the gentle rhythm of the river and the distant hum of cicadas. Picture walking through the cool, echoing halls of Karnak at dusk. Your fingers brush ancient stone, its surface warm from the day, cooling now under the stars. You hear the faint murmur of prayers carried away on the breeze, soft as a whisper meant only for you. Somewhere far away, the chisel's tap still rings faintly in the air, as if the builders are forever shaping stone for your monuments. But here in this moment, there is no hurry. No battles to fight, no court to navigate, no crown to bear. Only the quiet companionship of the night and the endless watch of the heavens. You lie back in your own bed now, the weight of the day slipping from your shoulders. The story of Ramses II, the golden child, the warrior, the builder, the god-king, drifts away like the last light on the horizon. What remains is calm, timeless, and still the kind of peace that lingers in the soul long after the tale has ended. Sleep now. Let the Nile carry you into dreams. Egypt waits eternal.